Elections are back, and so are debates, and national anthems, and candidates feeling like if they don't sing along, they won't be seen as patriotic. And candidates going back to smiling school.
Ron DeSantis.
All right, so who are these people?
I will not let you down.
Let's start with Florida Governor Ron DeSantis. DeSantis wants to show you he's a fighter. He's tough, and he's not going to take any BS. His sweet spot is culture war issues, so if you're a Republican and you love owning the libs, he's your guy. He's also riding high off of a large, nearly 20-point win in Florida in 2022. He was at one point polling close to Trump at over 30% nationally. But so far, his weakness for retail politics, shaking hands, kissing babies, has led to a decline in the polls, along with Trump gaining after practically each indictment. His goal for today? Stop the bleeding and regain his footing as the main alternative to Trump. There's also Chris Christie. Christie is known for many things, whether it's his attack dog speaking style, his 15% approval rating at the end of his term as governor of New Jersey, or the kamikazing of the Rubio 2016 presidential campaign. But now, Christie's pitch is all about electability, as he's the only person on stage who's been able to win in a solidly blue state, therefore arguing he would do the best in a general election.
And be able to put ourselves in a position where we get a majority of the vote, not only by winning the Congress and the Senate.
Next we have Vivek Ramaswamy, fresh, young, an outsider with some new ideas. The successful entrepreneur knows he sticks out the most on this stage, and that's what he wants. Add in some of the most head-turning and controversial policy positions in the whole primary, and you have a candidate who's caught the eye of a surprising amount of Republican voters.
Mr. Ramaswamy, listening to all of this, why should voters choose you over more experienced politicians on this stage?
I'm an entrepreneur. My parents came to this country with no money 40 years ago. I have gone on to found multi-billion-dollar companies.
Also on stage is former South Carolina governor and UN ambassador Nikki Haley. Experienced, moderate, and a seemingly reasonable woman who could do well in the swing area of the suburbs. She immediately goes after Democrats, but notably also goes after Trump and congressional Republicans as well.
Donald Trump added $8 trillion to our debt, and our kids are never going to forgive us for this. And so at the end of the day, you look at the 2024 budget, Republicans asked for $7.4 billion in earmarks. Democrats asked for $2.8 billion. So you tell me who are the big spenders. I think it's time for an accountant in the White House.
We also can't forget former Vice President Mike Pence. I swear, Pence's strategy is to evoke the vibes of a president as much as possible. If you had to cast one of these candidates as a president in a TV show, you'd probably go for Pence, and he knows it. Pence has to ride a tough middle ground of being now completely out of favor with Trump's base after January 6th. But also more tied to the Trump administration and its ups and downs than anyone else on stage.
Martha, you asked earlier who's the most best prepared for this job. And I must tell you, with all due respect to all of my friends on the stage, and even to one that's probably looking on, I think unquestionably I am the best prepared.
He immediately goes after Ramaswamy, who I'm sure Pence is frustrated is pulling ahead of him, the former vice president.
Now is not the time for on-the-job training. We don't need to bring in a rookie. We don't need to bring in people without experience. We need to bring
DeSantis comes in and reminds everyone of how anti-lockdown he was during COVID.
Why are we in this mess? Part of it, and a major reason, is because how this federal government handled COVID-19 by locking down this economy. It was a mistake. You bring Fauci in, you sit him down, and you say, Anthony, you are fired.
Ramaswamy draws a contrast between him and everyone else on stage.
Listen, now that everybody's gotten their memorized, pre-prepared slogans out of the way, we can actually have a real discussion now. The reality and the fact of the matter is...
Was that one of yours?
Not really, Mike, actually. We're just going to have some fun tonight. Do you want a super PAC puppet, or do you want a patriot who speaks the truth? Do you want incremental reform, which is what you're hearing about, or do you want revolution?
Doug Burgum shows some humility.
Of course, I'm from a town of 300 people. It's a big deal to make it on this stage with all these folks.
Burgum is the current governor of North Dakota. The Republican Party is the party of rural America, and he constantly tries to remind people of his small-town roots and North Dakota's rural character. He also tore his Achilles playing basketball the morning of the debate, so all I can think about every time he speaks is how many painkillers he's probably on.
Of course, we're paying too much for our energy in our state, in our country right now.
Burgum tries to redirect things to China, his policy sweet spot.
So if you buy a battery in this country, you buy a solar panel, it's being produced in a plant in China powered by coal.
Speaking of people who have no chance of winning, there's also Asa Hutchinson. Hutchinson is a man who, and there's at least one every cycle, who thinks to himself, Republicans want a guy with conservative accomplishments, right? Well, I was a conservative governor of Arkansas. They'll surely pick me.
And let me just tell you that I'm a pro-life governor from a conservative state that have a conservative record.
Moderators try to get everyone on the record about climate change.
Do you believe in human behavior is causing climate change? Raise your hand if you do.
Look, we're not school children. Let's have the debate. I mean, I'm happy to take it to start. Alexander?
So do you want to raise your hand or not?
I don't think that's the way to do it.
Ramaswamy pisses off everyone on stage, then says something about climate change that will not help him in a general election.
I'm the only person on the stage who isn't bought and paid for, so I can say this. The climate change agenda is a hoax. The climate change agenda is a hoax.
Christie, let's loose.
No,
Wait, hold on.
I've had enough. I've had enough already tonight of a guy who sounds like ChatGPT standing up here.
And Haley tries to draw some contrast, saying climate change is mostly the responsibility of other countries.
This is exactly why Margaret Thatcher said, if you want something said, ask a man. If you want something done, ask a woman. We also need to take on the international world and say, okay, India and China, you've got to stop polluting.
Senator Scott, are you bought and paid for?
Absolutely.
Are you bought and paid for?
I'm sorry?
Are you bought and paid for?
Absolutely not.
That's Tim Scott, senator from South Carolina who goes for reasonable, approachable, and moderate vibes. He wants to come off as much more calm and measured than his opponents. Right now, he's clearly finding his footing on the national stage.
Let me tell you why I say that, Brett. America,
Do it quickly.
America has cut. I'm a Southern boy and talk slow. So America, that was quick.
The subject then turns to abortion and whether or not Congress should pass a federal ban. Haley stakes out a moderate position that would play better in a general election.
When it comes to a federal ban, let's be honest with the American people and say it will take 60 Senate votes. It will take a majority of the House. So in order to do that, let's find consensus. Can't we all agree that we should ban late-term abortions?
DeSantis tries to flank her from the right.
You got to do what you think is right. I believe in a culture of life. I was proud to sign the heartbeat bill.
With some graphic detail.
I know a lady in Florida named Penny. She survived multiple abortion attempts. She was left discarded in a pan.
But then doesn't really answer the question.
But just to be clear, Governor, would you sign a 6-week ban federally?
I'm going to stand on the side of life. Look, I understand Wisconsin is going to do it different than Texas.
Pence goes for that sweet evangelical vote.
After I gave my life to Jesus Christ as my Lord and Savior, I opened up the book and I read, "Before I formed you in the womb, I knew you." A 15-week ban is an idea whose time has come.
Haley notes that a 15-week ban would never pass.
But when you're talking about a federal ban, be honest with the American people. We haven't had 45 pro-life senators in over 100 years, so no Republican president can ban abortions.
Senator Scott awkwardly tries to get a word in.
You have to be honest with the American people.
We have to have a 15-week limit.
But gets cut off in favor of Burgum.
Let's get Governor Burgum in for one minute here.
We should not have a federal abortion ban. And the reason why we shouldn't is very simple. It's the 10th Amendment in the Constitution.
Hutchinson tries to turn the attention to Democrats.
President Biden is pushing for a Democrat proposal, which is, in essence, abortion on demand through the term.
Scott says something very, very similar to Hutchinson.
We cannot let states like California, New York, and Illinois have abortions on demand up until the day of birth.
And keeps going.
We can't leave it to Illinois. We can't leave it to Minnesota. We can't leave it to Illinois. We must solve that issue with a 15-week limit at a minimum.
The issue turns to crime.
American cities are in decline. People are moving out as homelessness, drugs, crime move in.
Christie, a former U.S. attorney, can't wait to get in on the subject.
I'm the only person, along with Governor Hutchinson, up on this stage who's actually running United States Attorney's Office. The problem is that these prosecutors in these localities in the states are refusing to do their job and to arrest violent criminals. And when Hunter Biden fills out a fake application, a false application for a gun permit in a Christie administration, he would go to jail for 10 years.
Ramaswamy assigns many causes to crime in big cities, including mental health.
The reason we have that mental health epidemic is that people are so hungry for purpose and meaning at a time when family, faith, patriotism, hard work have all disappeared.
Pence takes offense and tries to get the audience into it.
We're not looking for a new national identity. The American people are the most faith-filled, freedom-loving, idealistic, hardworking people the world has ever known.
An interesting back and forth ensues, with two opposite messaging strategies. One focused on positivity and one focused on negativity.
As some others like you may have on the stage, it's Morning in America speech. It is not Morning in America. We live in a dark moment.
You are
and we have to
equating the
recognize
American
that
people with the failed government in Washington, D.C.
DeSantis hops in with his reoccurring theme of America in decline.
This is a symptom of America's decline.
And then ties it to crime.
George Soros funding these radical left-wing district attorneys. They get into office and they say they're not going to prosecute crimes they disagree with. There's one guy in this entire country that's ever done anything about that. Me. Two of these district attorneys in Florida elected with Soros funding who said they wouldn't do their job. I removed them from their posts. They are gone.
Burgum and his torn Achilles hop back in.
Nobody ever asked the question of what about the crime wave in small towns? Because in a small town, neighbors help neighbors. One thing that I think this country could use is somebody in the White House that understands small town values.
And Hutchinson cuts the conversation with some fentanyl.
Let's deal with the challenge of fentanyl.
Then Hutchinson makes an interesting pivot on the crime issue.
It starts at the top with the respect for our justice system that a former president who's under indictment has undermined by attacking judges, by attacking prosecutors.
At this point, you may have heard or already realized that Trump, who is a clear favorite in this Republican primary and is sitting at over 50% nationally, refused to attend this debate. As Trump is every candidate's main threat to their dreams of becoming president, everyone on stage is faced with an interesting question. How much do I go after Trump? Right now, he's winning by a lot, so you need to take some of his voters away in order to win. But how do these candidates go after Trump without alienating these voters? You may also be asking yourself, well, if Trump isn't even here, then does this debate even matter? And the answer to that is probably not. Anyway, Bayer asked the spiciest question of the night.
If former President Trump is convicted in a court of law, would you still support him as your party's choice? Please raise your hand if you would.
All those in favor? Carried unanimously.
Christie stakes out some ground that's controversial in a Republican primary.
Whether or not you believe that the criminal charges are right or wrong, the conduct is beneath the office of President of the United States. This is the great thing about this country. Booing is allowed, but it doesn't change the truth. It doesn't change the truth.
Ramaswamy positions himself as the staunchest Trump defender.
Honest to God, your claim that Donald Trump is motivated by vengeance and grievance would be a lot more credible if your entire campaign were not based on vengeance and grievance against one man. We cannot set a precedent where the party in power uses police force to indict its political opponents. It is wrong.
And things get chaotic.
You sit here in an answer right.
So listen, the more time we spend doing this, the less time they can talk about issues you want to talk about.
I know a lot better than you do. You've never done it, like you've never done anything to try to advance the interests of this government except to put yourself forward as a candidate tonight. Donald Trump said it's okay to suspend the Constitution. Now, the oath you take is to preserve, protect, and defend, not suspend.
Moderators then talk about January 6th and Pence's decision not to attempt to overturn the election.
Do you believe that Mike Pence did the right thing, Senator Scott? Do you believe he did the right thing?
Absolutely, he did the right thing. When I'm president, the first thing I'll do is fire Merrick Garland.
I just thought this was funny because, like, of course he's going to fire him. The new president always picks the new attorney general. It's a part of his cabinet. Then Scott tries to evoke Obama.
And I will bring that change to the greatest nation on God's green earth.
The moderators press DeSantis, but he dodges.
Governor DeSantis, do you believe that Mike Pence did the right thing on January 6th?
So here's what we need to do. We need to end the weaponization of these federal agents.
But that's not
and I
the
will do
question.
that.
That's not the question.
I know, but here's the thing.
gonna answer the
This
question?
election is not about January 6th.
Then he describes being a legal advisor to a team of Navy SEALs in a very interesting way.
I was assigned with U.S. Navy SEALs in Iraq.
Then he finally kinda answers the question.
I've answered this before.
So, yes.
Why are we? Mike did his duty. I got no beef with him. But here's the thing.
The moderates all hop in to defend Pence.
Mike Pence stood for the Constitution.
I do think that Vice President Pence did the right thing, and I do think that we need to give him credit for that. Trump is the most disliked politician in America. We can't win a general election that way.
Mike Pence did the right thing on January 6th.
Burgum really desperately tries to get the convo back to China.
China is the number one threat to our country, and every minute that these 8 candidates spend talking about the past instead about the future is time that is just you know who loves it? Biden loves it, but China loves it.
Ramaswamy's not having any of it.
Well, Mike, why don't you say this? Join me in making a commitment that on day one you would pardon Donald Trump. I'm the only candidate on the stage who had the courage to actually say it.
Now for another spicy question.
Is there anyone on stage who would not support the increase of more funding to Ukraine?
We would
not support it.
Europe needs to step up.
But you're saying you would not too, Governor DeSantis?
I will have Europe pull their weight. Right now, they're not doing that.
You would not support
and I think
more
we need
funding?
to do, and I think our support should be contingent on them doing it. And I would have support in China to be able to take China and do what we need to do with China.
Ramaswamy giddily stakes out another position that separates him from the pack.
We are protecting against an invasion across somebody else's border when we should use those same military resources to prevent across the invasion of our own southern border.
Christie comes firing back, very, very, very graphically.
They have gouged out people's eyes, cut off their ears, and then gone into those homes and raped the daughters and the wives who were left as widows and orphans.
Pence passionately hops in an exchange with Ramaswamy.
Anybody that thinks that we can't solve the problems here in the United States and be the leader of the free world has a pretty small view of the greatest nation on earth. Vivek, if we do the giveaway that you want to give to Putin to give him his land, it's not going to be too long before he rolls across a NATO border, and frankly, our men and women of our armed forces are going to have to go and fight him.
I have a newsflash. The USSR does not exist anymore. It fell back in 1990.
Did I say
the real
USSR?
threat? You talked about the communists. And the real communists that we have to address right now
have any
is the
idea what Vladimir Putin's aims
you
are?
already spoke. Now I actually have something to say.
Vladimir Putin has been saying he wants to reestablish the old Soviet sphere
You've made
of
your point,
influence.
Vice President.
Chaos ensues again.
And I am the only non-neocon on this stage. But keep us out of war.
Mr. Vice President, we can't hear. Mr. Vice President,
is to give Russia
Mr. Vice
everything
President.
they've got.
Mr. Vice President, when we hear this bell,
Yes.
that means your time's done.
Haley, a former UN ambassador, is happy the topic finally changed to foreign policy.
Less than 3.5% of our defense budget has been given to Ukraine. Look at what Putin did today. He killed Prigozhin. When I was at the UN, the Russian ambassador suddenly died. This guy is a murderer, and you are choosing a murderer over a pro-American country.
You know, Nikki, I wish you well in your future career on the boards of Lockheed and Raytheon.
You know, I'm not on
but
the
the fact
boards
of the matter,
and Raytheon, and you know,
Boeing came off of it, but you've been pushing this lie. You've been pushing this lie all week,
Nikki. You want
Nikki.
to go and defund Israel? You want to
Okay,
give
let me
Taiwan
address
to
that.
China?
I'm glad you brought that up.
Go and give
I'm going to
Ukraine
address
Russia?
each of those right now. This is the false lies of a professional politician. There you have
Under
it.
your watch,
So
you
the
will make
reality is,
America less safe. You have no foreign policy experience, and it shows.
and you know,
DeSantis pivots away from the Ukraine topic.
You're sending all this money, but you're not doing what we need to do to secure our own border. When these drug pushers are bringing fentanyl across the border, that's going to be the last thing they do. We're going to use force, and we're going to leave them stone cold dead.
Senator Scott is asked about China.
Senator Scott on China, that same question.
And I'd speak about China.
Let's fire the 87,000 IRS agents and hire or double the number of Border Patrol agents.
The topic now changes to education, a culture war's sweet spot for DeSantis.
We need education in this country, not indoctrination in this country. First, we had schools open during COVID, and a lot of the problems that we've seen are because these lockdown states lock their kids out of school for a year, year and a half. In Florida, we eliminated critical race theory from our K-12 schools. We eliminated gender ideology from our K-12 schools.
And Ramaswamy outflanks DeSantis to the right.
Let's shut down the head of the snake, the Department of Education. Take that $80 billion, put it in the hands of parents across this country. End the teachers' unions at the local level to allow public schools to compete. Every high school senior should have to pass the same civics test that, frankly, every immigrant, including my mother, had to pass in order to become a citizen of this country. We also have a federal government that pays single women more not to have a man in the house than to have a man in the house, contributing to an epidemic of fatherlessness.
And Burgum has his piece.
As a governor, I shadow a student. The night before I find out the student finds out, I'm going to go to every class with them.
As the debate closes, the questions get a little more silly.
And this is for you, Governor Christie. Do you believe that the recent spike in UFO encounters
I get the UFO question?
Closing statements lead to a couple interesting quotes.
Every job I had growing up was one where I took a shower at the end of the day, not at the beginning of the day. Our cities are less safe because of the fentanyl pouring into this country.
God is real. There are two genders. Fossil fuels are a requirement for human prosperity.
And there you have it, the first Republican primary debate of the 2024 election cycle. I hope this video was fun and informative. I'm trying to experiment with new video formats, so let me know if you'd want me to make more videos like this one. Thanks again, everyone. Until next time.